In 1974, a 7-Eleven in Columbus, Ohio, had an entire aisle that does not exist anymore. Wax bottles filled with syrup sat next to chocolate bars shaped like rocket ships. A kid could walk in with 35 cents and leave with a flavor that no laboratory has recreated since. Number 12 was pulled from shelves after parents confused it with a street drug. Number 4 sold 500 million packets in 18 months. Number 2 actually went to outer space. These 25 snacks were tiny acts of chemical wonder wrapped in packaging so loud it could wake the neighbors. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 25 strangest snack foods from the 1970s that tasted better than anything on shelves today. Number 25th, Screaming Yellow Zonkers. The box was jet black and covered in nonsense, random sentences, fake warnings, absurd claims printed in white ink on every surface. One line on the back declared that there was no prize inside because the prize was the box itself. Lincoln Snacks of Nebraska launched these butter-glazed popcorn nuggets in 1968, and by the early 70s, they were a counterculture icon sitting on dorm room shelves across the country. The popcorn inside was simple. Puffed kernels coated in a buttery glaze that turned your fingers slick and golden. But nobody bought Zonkers for the popcorn alone. They bought it because the packaging read like a fever dream written at 2 in the morning by someone who had consumed too much of their own product. College students stacked the boxes on bookshelves like paperback novels. A box cost under $1 and lasted exactly one sitting. The black box stood out on shelves the way a tuxedo stands out at a barbecue. Conagra eventually acquired Lincoln Snacks and quietly erased Zonkers from existence by 2007. The popcorn is gone. The weird poetry on that black box is what people still talk about decades later. Pause for 1 second. Number 24. Bottle Caps Candy. These small press tablets showed up in 1972 and did something no other candy on the market had tried. They tasted like soda. Each disc was stamped to look like a miniature bottle cap, and each one delivered a different flavor. Cola, root beer, orange, grape, cherry. The root beer tablet was the one that separated believers from skeptics. It captured that sharp herbal bite of a real root beer in a chalky little coin you could keep in your pocket all afternoon. Wonka made them, and the factory somehow compressed an entire soda fountain into a tablet smaller than your thumbnail. Kids traded them at lunch tables like currency. The root beer caps were worth 2 colas in any schoolyard negotiation, and everyone knew it. A single roll cost about 15 cents and gave you enough flavors to run your own soda stand without a machine. They still exist today in name, but the formula shifted somewhere in the 90s. That original root beer tang, the one that burned just slightly at the back of your throat like actual sassafras, disappeared and never came back. Number 23. Jiffy Pop. The aluminum dome started flat against the stovetop, then it swelled, slowly at first, then faster, rising into a silver balloon, while kernels cracked and ricocheted off the foil walls inside. Jiffy Pop launched in 1958 out of LaPorte, Indiana, but the 70s turned it into a Friday night ritual for families across the country. Mothers, fathers, and children gathered around the stove and watched that dome inflate like a science experiment you were allowed to eat afterward. The popcorn inside was nothing extraordinary, lightly salted, a little greasy from the oil baked into the base. But the experience of shaking that pan and watching the foil rise was better than anything a microwave produced 10 years later. Stage magician Harry Blackstone Jr. did the television commercials and called it the magic treat that was as much fun to make as it was to eat. He was not wrong. The magic was the anticipation, the slow rise, the muffled percussion of kernels hitting aluminum like tiny drums. No microwave bag has ever made a child stand on a kitchen chair just to watch food happen. Number 22. Koogle. In 1971, Kraft decided that peanut butter was boring. Their solution was Koogle, a flavored peanut spread that came in chocolate, banana, vanilla, and cinnamon. The jar had a googly-eyed mascot called Koogle Nut on the label, wearing a hat and staring out from the shelf with an expression that was equal parts friendly and unhinged. The spread inside was sweeter and smoother than anything Skippy or Jif had ever attempted. Kids did not put it on sandwiches. They ate it straight from the jar with a spoon, which was probably the point Kraft was hoping for all along. The chocolate version tasted like someone had melted a Reese's cup into peanut butter and stirred it until it gave up resisting. A jar cost about 79 cents and rarely survived the week. Kraft pulled Koogle from shelves by the late 70s after health concerns about the sugar content piled up. Parents had watched their children eat what was essentially dessert for breakfast and call it lunch. Koogle vanished, and flavored peanut butter did not return to American shelves for decades. Number 21. Razzles. Razzles were first introduced in 1966 with only one flavor, raspberry. The tagline told the whole story. First, it is a candy. Then, it is a gum. That sentence made absolutely no sense until you put one in your mouth. The small round tablet started hard and sweet like a sweetheart. Then, after 10 or 15 seconds of chewing, the texture shifted. The candy dissolved and left behind a soft, fruity gum that had no business tasting as good as it did. The transition felt like a magic trick performed inside your own jaw. By the 70s, Razzles had expanded into multiple fruit flavors and claimed a permanent spot on every corner store candy rack in the country. Fleer Corporation made them and sold millions of packs at roughly 10 cents each. The trick never stopped working. Every single time, even after dozens of packs, that moment when candy became gum felt like something impossible was happening between your teeth. Nothing else on the shelf did what Razzles did. Nothing else even attempted it. The candy that could not decide what it wanted to be ended up being the most memorable thing in the aisle. Number 20. Fiddle Faddle. Fiddle Faddle, thick caramel popcorn. This was the quieter cousin of Cracker Jack, and in many households, it was the superior one. Lincoln Snacks, the same company behind Screaming Yellow Zonkers, made Fiddle Faddle starting in the late 60s. The concept was basic, popcorn coated in a toffee glaze, sealed in a box that cost about 50 cents. But the glaze on Fiddle Faddle was thicker and crunchier than anything Cracker Jack had ever managed to produce. Each kernel wore a shell of caramelized sugar so firm you could hear it crack between your teeth from across the kitchen. There was no prize inside, no toy, no temporary tattoo, no baseball card, just popcorn so aggressively coated in toffee that it felt closer to candy than a snack. The difference between Fiddle Faddle and Cracker Jack was the difference between a handshake and a bear hug. One was polite, the other meant business. Conagra absorbed the brand and reformulated it years later. The version that exists today under that name is a faded photocopy. The original Fiddle Faddle turned a simple kernel into something that belonged in a glass display case at a county fair. Number 18. Nik-L-Nip wax bottles. These tiny wax bottles cost a nickel when they first appeared, which is exactly where the name came from. Nik-L-Nip. Nik-L-Nip. Each bottle stood about 2 inches tall, filled with a few drops of brightly colored fruit syrup, and sealed with a wax cap you bit off with your front teeth. The syrup inside lasted about half a second, one small sip of cherry or grape or orange, and then it was over. Gone. Then you were left chewing a lump of flavorless paraffin wax like a cow working through its afternoon. The entire experience made no logical sense whatsoever. The candy was 90% packaging material and 10% sugar water. But every kid who walked into a convenience store in the 70s grabbed a pack anyway, because biting the head off a tiny wax bottle and drinking the mysterious liquid trapped inside felt like a ritual of childhood. Tootsie Roll industry still makes them today, but the wax is different now, softer and less satisfying to bite through. The original wax had a resistance to it, a snap that made the whole experience feel earned. Number 17. Carnation breakfast bars. Carnation introduced these in 1975 inside a bright yellow box that promised a complete breakfast in bar form. The marketing pitch was aimed at parents. The flavor was aimed at children. And somehow, both sides fell for it at the same time. Chocolate chip and peanut butter were the two flavors that mattered. The texture was dense and crumbly, somewhere between a granola bar and a cookie that had been left in a lunchbox overnight, and each one was fortified with enough vitamins to make a parent feel like they had not completely failed at the most important meal of the day. Kids ate them on the school bus with one hand, while holding a backpack strap with the other. Teenagers ate them walking to first period. Adults ate them in rush hour traffic and pretended it counted as a real meal. The chocolate chip version had a sweetness that landed right between candy bar and cereal, a zone that nothing in the breakfast aisle has managed to hit since. Carnation tried a comeback in 1994. It lasted 3 years. By 1997, the bars were gone for good, and an entire generation lost the only breakfast they had ever genuinely looked forward to eating. General Mills released the first blueberry-flavored cereal in America in December of 1972 and put a cartoon ghost on the box. Boo Berry was the third monster cereal, arriving 1 year after Count Chocula and Franken Berry had already proven that kids would eat anything with a cartoon monster staring at them from the breakfast table. Pause for 1 second. The cereal pieces were small and crunchy, and they turned the milk a pale shade of blue that looked like something extracted from a laboratory beaker. The taste was artificial blueberry pushed to its absolute chemical limit. Sweet, tangy, and completely disconnected from any actual blueberry that had ever grown on a bush anywhere on Earth. But that was the whole appeal. Boo Berry was not pretending to be fruit. It was pretending to be haunted, and that was far more interesting to a 7-year-old standing in a grocery aisle trying to convince a parent that this was a reasonable breakfast choice. General Mills eventually pulled it from year-round production and made it a seasonal Halloween release only. The ghost shows up in October and vanishes by November, which is exactly what a ghost should do. Number 15. Reggie Bar. In 1978, the Curtis Candy Company named a candy bar after Reggie Jackson, the Yankee slugger who had hammered 3 home runs on 3 consecutive pitches in the 1977 World Series. The bar was round and flat, loaded with roasted peanuts and caramel, and coated in milk chocolate. Standard Brands handed them out free at Yankee Stadium on opening day in April of 1978, and when Reggie stepped to the plate and hit a home run in his very first at-bat, the crowd erupted. Fans threw thousands of Reggie bars onto the outfield grass. The field looked like a candy factory had detonated. Groundskeepers spent 20 minutes picking up wrappers. The bar itself was solid, similar to a Baby Ruth, but with a denser caramel chew that stuck to your teeth like a reminder. Sales dropped after Reggie left for the California Angels. By 1981, the bar was gone. It returned briefly in 1993 when Jackson entered the Baseball Hall of Fame, then vanished permanently. The candy was good, but the moment it created on that outfield, with chocolate raining from the upper deck like confetti, was something a candy bar had never done before and has never done since. Number 14. Choco'Lite. Nestlé launched this bar in late 1971 and called it the first puffed milk chocolate bar with crispy chips produced in America. The chocolate was whipped full of tiny air pockets, hundreds of them, which made the bar feel impossibly light in your hand. Picking one up was like holding a chocolate cloud that somehow kept its shape. The crispy chips inside added small bursts of crunch scattered through the aeration, and the whole thing dissolved on your tongue faster than any standard candy bar had a right to. Choco'Lite became one of the best-selling bars in the country through the mid-1970s. It cost around 20 cents, and the brown and gold wrapper looked elegant for something sharing shelf space with Snickers and Milky Way. By the early 1980s, Nestlé retired it. Declining sales and a crowded product line forced the decision, but the real loss was the texture. Nobody has made a mass-market American candy bar that light since. Nestlé eventually acquired the Aero bar from Rowntree in Britain, which came close to that same airy bite. But close is not the same. Close never is. Number 13. Zotz. An Italian candy family created these hard fruit candies with a secret buried in the center. Fizz. Real, aggressive, tongue-attacking fizz that hit without warning. The outside was a standard hard candy shell in flavors like cherry, grape, orange, and watermelon. But bite down before the shell fully dissolved and the core erupted. Sodium bicarbonate mixed with malic acid and tartaric acid packed into the middle like a tiny chemical reaction waiting for permission to detonate. Frank Landry of Andre Prost Incorporated discovered Zotz in 1970 during a business trip to Italy when an Italian supplier handed him a box as a gift. He brought them home, gave them to his children, watched their faces contort in shock, and immediately began importing them to every store in the United States that would carry them. The fizz was so aggressive it could make your eyes water if you were not prepared. Most kids bit down early on purpose, just to feel the eruption hit their tongue like a tiny flavor grenade. Zotz are still produced by the same Italian family today, but they sit in specialty candy shops now instead of occupying the front rack of every gas station the way they did in 1975. Number 12. Astropops. Two former rocket scientists created these in 1963, and the space race was not just an inspiration. It was the entire design philosophy. The shape was an inverted cone, pointed at the top and wide at the base, built to look like a rocket ship standing on its launch pad, waiting for ignition. 3 layers of hard candy spiraled down from the point in red, yellow, and green, each one a different flavor that revealed itself only after you had spent 10 minutes working through the layer above it. The lollipop was enormous, 5 inches long, and nearly impossible to finish in a single sitting. Kids carried them around for hours. Tongue-stained in traffic light colors, the sticky surface collecting lint and pocket dust and dog hair like a forensic evidence kit documenting everywhere its owner had been that afternoon. The original version had a sharp-pointed plastic stick at the narrow end, which led to enough mouth injuries that the company eventually flipped the entire design upside down. Astropops disappeared from mass production in the 2000s, but returned briefly in limited runs. The ones from the 1970s were sharper, harder, and more committed to their rocket ship identity than anything that followed. Number 11. Wacky Wafers. These were flat fruit-flavored discs, roughly the size of a silver dollar, stacked in clear cellophane like a roll of coins from a candy bank that only dealt in sugar. Flavors included watermelon, banana, green apple, strawberry, and grape. Each wafer was thin, crisp, and it dissolved on the tongue, feeling less like eating and more like receiving a transmission from a flavor laboratory that had perfected its formula decades ago. The watermelon wafer had a sweetness so clean and specific that anyone who tasted it once could identify it blindfolded 30 years later in a room full of competing candy. Nestlé made them through the 70s and 80s, before phasing them out in the late 90s. A small indie candy company attempted a revival in 2017, but it faded quickly. The appeal of Wacky Wafers was their total lack of pretense. No gimmick, no toy inside, no puzzle on the wrapper, no mascot with a catchphrase. Just a stack of flat, perfect fruit-flavored discs that tasted like the ideal version of a flavor that existed only in candy form and nowhere in nature. Number 10. Lick-a-Maid. Before it became Fun Dip, it was called Lick-a-Maid, and the whole product was nothing but pouches of fruit-flavored sugar powder sold alongside a plain, white candy stick. Sunline Incorporated created the original version back in the 1940s. The 1973 edition of the edible Lick-A-Sticks changed the entire game. Now a kid could lick the vanilla-flavored stick, dunk it into a pouch of sour powder, and repeat the process until both the stick and the powder vanished. The flavors were grape, cherry, and lime, each one so intensely concentrated that it could stain your tongue for the rest of the school day and well into the evening. Teachers always knew exactly who had eaten Lick-a-Maid at lunch because the evidence was printed on every tongue in the classroom and it was impossible to scrub off. Number 8. Jell-O Pudding Pops. General Foods introduced these in 1979, and the timing could not have been better. Frozen pudding on a stick. They came in chocolate, vanilla, banana, and a swirled combination that mixed chocolate and vanilla into a marbled spiral. The texture was nothing like ice cream, and nothing like a popsicle. It was denser, smoother, and had a slight resistance when you bit into it, like cold silk that held its shape against your teeth before slowly giving way. Bill Cosby did the television commercials throughout the late 1970s and into the 1980s. For a while, his face and the product were inseparable in the American imagination. But the product itself needed no spokesperson. Pudding Pops solved a problem nobody had ever thought to articulate. They gave you the richness of pudding in a portable form you could eat outside on a porch step without needing a bowl, a spoon, or a table. The chocolate version had a cocoa depth that frozen fudge bars could not touch, no matter how hard they tried. The vanilla tasted like someone had taken fresh custard from a kitchen counter and frozen it onto a wooden stick. Jell-O discontinued Pudding Pops in 2004 because the cost of manufacturing and storing frozen pudding at scale was too high to justify. The freezer aisle has had a hole in it ever since. Number 7. Franken Berry cereal. General Mills released Franken Berry alongside Count Chocula in March 1971 as a matching pair of monster cereals aimed squarely at the Saturday morning cartoon crowd. The cereal was strawberry-flavored, bright pink, and shaped like tiny marshmallow ghosts mixed with berry-flavored oat pieces that stained the milk rose-colored within 30 seconds of hitting the bowl. The monster on the box was a Frankenstein-inspired creature with a strawberry-shaped head, bolts in his neck, and a grin that made him look more bewildered than menacing. But the real story happened less than a year after launch. In February 1972, doctors at a pediatric clinic documented a condition they informally called Franken Berry stool. The cereal contained a red dye called red dye number 2 that was so indigestible it passed straight through the human body and turned children's waste bright pink. Parents called pediatricians in a panic. General Mills pulled the formula, removed the dye, and quietly sent the reformulated version back to shelves. The cereal survived. The flavor was always straightforward, sweet, vaguely strawberry, coated in enough sugar to make the milk at the bottom of the bowl taste like melted candy. But Franken Berry earned a place in medical case studies that no other breakfast cereal in American history had ever claimed. Number 6. Marathon Bar. Mars Candy Company introduced the Marathon Bar in 1973, and it stretched a full 8 inches long. a braided caramel rope covered in milk chocolate and wrapped in a bright red package with a ruler printed on the back, so kids could actually measure things with their candy bar. The braided shape was not decoration. It was engineering. The caramel twisted in on itself so tightly that every bite required genuine jaw effort. Your teeth pulled and stretched and fought against the braid like it had been designed to resist you. A marathon bar could last an entire Saturday afternoon if you had discipline, and most kids did not because the chocolate and caramel combination was too good to ration. The name was chosen on purpose. Eating one was supposed to feel like an endurance event. Mars discontinued it in 1981 after exactly 8 years on the market, which felt like a cruel joke for a candy named after going the distance. It did not even reach its 10th birthday. The British version, called Curly Wurly, is still sold in the United Kingdom today, but it is shorter, softer, thinner, and lacks the structural aggression that made the American original feel like a candy bar that was also picking a fight with your jaw. Number 5. Space Dust. General Foods released this in the mid-1970s as a powdered cousin of Pop Rocks. It used the same carbonated candy technology, the same trapped carbon dioxide, but it was ground into a fine, glittering powder that dissolved on the tongue in a storm of tiny, controlled explosions. The flavor was sharp and sweet, and the fizzing sensation was subtler than Pop Rocks, yet it lasted longer because the powder spread across every surface of your mouth at once. The problem was not the candy. The problem was the name, Space Dust. In the mid-1970s, Angel Dust was the street name for PCP, one of the most dangerous drugs circulating through American cities. Parents watched their children walk into convenience stores and ask for Space Dust by name, and the panic was immediate and furious. Letters poured into General Foods headquarters. Local television news stations ran alarmed segments. PTA groups across the country organized campaigns demanding it be pulled from every shelf. General Foods rebranded it as Cosmic Candy in a desperate attempt to break the association. The new name did not stick. The controversy had already buried it. Cosmic Candy disappeared within a few years. The product itself was completely harmless: sugar, carbon dioxide, food coloring. But the name turned an innocent candy into a national scandal that no amount of new packaging could undo. Number 4. Pop Rocks. In 1975, General Foods chemist William Mitchell figured out how to trap pressurized carbon dioxide gas inside hardened sugar crystals. When those crystals landed on the warm, wet surface of your tongue, they cracked open and released the gas in a series of rapid, tiny explosions that sounded like a miniature fireworks display happening inside your own skull. The packets cost about 15 cents each. They came in cherry, orange, and grape, and they sold 500 million units in their first 18 months on the market. 500 million. No candy in American history had moved that fast. Then the rumors arrived. A kid named Mikey from the Life cereal television commercials had supposedly eaten 6 packs of Pop Rocks and chased them with a can of Coca-Cola, and his stomach had exploded at the kitchen table. The story was completely false. Mikey was alive and healthy and had never been to a hospital. But the rumor spread through every schoolyard, sleepover, church camp, and cafeteria in the country faster than any paid advertising campaign General Foods could have purchased with their entire annual budget. Schools banned the candy. Parents confiscated packs from lunch boxes. General Foods set up a toll-free hotline, took out full-page advertisements in major newspapers, and mailed letters directly to school principals across all 50 states, confirming that Pop Rocks were safe and that no child had ever been harmed by the product in any way. None of it made a single bit of difference. The myth was already cemented into the permanent record of American childhood. Pop Rocks are still sold today in the same small foil packets, and they still crackle on your tongue the same way they did in 1975. But nothing will ever match the beautiful chaos of those first years when an entire nation genuinely believed that a small packet of fizzing sugar crystals had the power to destroy a child from the inside out. Number 3. Count Chocula. The first chocolate-flavored monster cereal reached American shelves in March of 1971, and the Count on the box looked like a cartoon Dracula who had wandered into a chocolate factory and decided to stay. The cereal was a mix of chocolate-flavored grain pieces and small brown marshmallows that dissolved into the milk on contact, turning the bowl into something that tasted like the last sip at the bottom of a glass of chocolate pudding. General Mills ran Saturday morning television commercials featuring Count Chocula, bickering with Franken Berry in animated skits that played like a horror comedy written for 6-year-olds. A box cost about 69 cents, and a single serving contained enough sugar to fuel a child through an entire morning of cartoons. Count Chocula was not nutritious by any standard that existed then or now. But it made an ordinary Tuesday morning feel like Halloween, and for millions of children in the 70s, that transformation was worth more than any vitamin. General Mills restricted Count Chocula to seasonal October production years ago. The Count only appears during Halloween now, which for a vampire is probably the only schedule that makes sense. Number 2. Space Food Sticks. Pillsbury created these as part of a product line developed for actual NASA astronauts, and the early versions traveled aboard Skylab 3 in 1973, making them one of the few commercially available snacks that had genuinely been to outer space and returned. The sticks were soft and chewy, about 4 inches long, and came in flavors like chocolate, peanut butter, caramel, and scotch. 14 individually wrapped sticks sat inside each box. The packaging featured a metallic silver sheen and futuristic block lettering designed to make a 10-year-old in suburban Ohio feel like they were eating the exact same food that an astronaut consumed while floating 200 miles above the Earth. That illusion worked. It worked incredibly well. Space food sticks became a lunchbox staple through the mid-70s, while America was still captivated by the romance of the space program and everything connected to it. Then the national fascination cooled. Pillsbury, sensing the shift, quietly dropped the word space from the product name and rebranded them as simply Food Sticks. It was one of the worst marketing decisions of the decade. Nobody wanted plain food sticks. The word food on its own did not sell anything. Candy buttons on paper strips. 3 rows of tiny sugar dots pressed onto a long strip of white paper. That was the entire product. No flavor variety beyond vaguely sweet. No chocolate, no caramel, no fizz, no crackle, no secret center, no mascot. No gimmick beyond the fact that peeling a single sugar dot off a paper strip without tearing the paper was nearly impossible. A piece of paper came off with the candy and ended up in your mouth each time, and you chewed through it anyway because admitting defeat to a strip of paper was not something a kid in the 70s was prepared to do. The dots were pink, blue, and white. The flavors were functionally identical. The paper tasted like nothing and stuck to your tongue like a postage stamp. And yet candy buttons occupied space in every candy aisle, every drugstore spinner rack, every trick-or-treat bag, and every county fair booth in America for the entire decade. A strip cost a few pennies. The experience lasted as long as your patience held. The appeal was never the taste. The taste barely registered. The appeal was the process. Dot by dot, row by row, each one peeled with the focus and care of someone diffusing a very small and very sweet explosive device. No snack before or since has demanded so little from your taste buds and so much from your fingertips. That 7-Eleven in Columbus is a tire shop now. The shelves where space food sticks sat next to screaming yellow Zonkers have been gone for 40 years, but the flavors are still here. Here is my challenge. Find one snack from this list that still exists in some form. Buy it and eat it slowly. Notice whether the taste matches what your memory has stored all these decades. Most of the time, it will not. That gap between what you remember and what you taste now is the whole point. The snack was never really the thing. The moment was the thing. Share which one you are going to track down in the comments. I want to know if the Nik-L-Nip wax bottles still taste the way they did when you were 7. I want to know if anyone else ate the paper with the candy buttons and pretended not to notice. Because these were not just snacks. They were proof that the strangest food, eaten at the right age, in the right decade, becomes something no modern recipe can replace.